it all in, one by one. Poet
Greetings, beloved. Hey, listen, you are listening to the People Power Podcast. We are grateful to be here with you. I need to let you know that I'm just coming off of Climate Week, off of Climate Month or Earth Month and Earth Week, and have had a fabulous time in Chicago, being able to utilize the gifting that God has given me to speak to the people. And I am excited and full of energy, and I want to make sure that we bring that to the table today because we've got an energizing guest with us today. But before we get there, let's go ahead and let's talk to our dearly beloved Lindsay. Lindsay is our co-host, and Lindsay is also the deputy director of the People's Justice Council. Lindsay, how you doing today, and where you coming from?
Hey, so glad to be here with y'all today. Lindsay Harper, Deputy Director of the People's Justice Council. Always glad to be here with y'all on the People's Powered Podcast. Super excited about our guest, Daniel, today. Y'all, Daniel is the truth. He is always someone that I personally trust and know I can go to for great information. I'm personally feeling great today. It's a little rainy today here in Atlanta. We need it. So yeah, let's get this rain going and let's get the conversation going too.
All right, all right. Listen, she's already given us the name Daniel Tate, but let me tell you a little bit about Daniel. And I don't want to give a bio. I'll just give you what I know about Daniel. Just as he's been a source for Lindsay, he's also been a source for us at PJC, especially when it's come down to our advocacy around clean energy for Alabama. I remember Daniel when I first came to Alabama and us doing the tour of Alabama advocating for clean energy along with gas. And it was just a fabulous time getting to know the landscape of Alabama, the people, and you all's work. When it comes down to energy, clean energy policy, I don't know if there's any place else to go than to go to Energy Alabama. And so right now, I just want to put our hands together, our virtual hands together, as well as our physical hands together for none other than Daniel Tate. How we doing, Daniel, and where you coming from?
Good to see you, Rev, and good to see you, Lindsay. I appreciate y'all having me on the podcast. Coming to you live from Huntsville, Alabama. So the Rocket City here, and glad to be here.
All right, all right. Daniel, as I was just saying, when it comes down to you all's work with Energy Alabama, you all do a lot of advocacy work around energy policy. Um, I don't want to necessarily talk about the wins just yet because I also want to bring in the other work that you all do around clean energy. Because there's no need in pigeonholing you all when you all are extremely impactful throughout the state of Alabama when it comes down to clean energy. So, do you want to just tell the people a little bit more about what you all do and who you all are as far as Energy Alabama is concerned?
Yeah, that'd be great. We've been around for a little while now. We were founded in 2014, and our work is to educate and advocate on clean energy all throughout the state. So we have an excellent team that works on the education side of the house, and for us, that's working in schools and K through 12. It's working in the community and advocating there, teaching people, things about their own home and how the energy system works, and then also doing some teacher professional development, helping people understand how our energy system works there. So we're really excited about that. A couple of things that we are really proud of are being able to have lending libraries that we're opening up throughout the state of Alabama for teachers. So as they're looking at how to teach energy to the young folks of Alabama, that they have, the materials and supplies to be able to do that without having to go into their own pockets. So that's really important work that we're doing there, and very proud of that. On the advocacy side, that is, trying to push for clean energy policy at the state and local level. We do a little bit of regional work because up here in North Alabama, we have TVA, which is a utility that serves about parts of 7 states. But mostly it's the Alabama legislature, it's the Alabama Public Service Commission, the sometimes little known, maybe a little bit more known now than it ever was, but a little known agency that determines how much you pay to Alabama Power. And then also really important are the rules, ordinances, and regulations at the local level, like the city of Birmingham, the city of Montgomery. Those do have a huge impact on folks' day to day lives, and so those are the areas that we advocate for: clean energy, affordable energy, making sure people can be able to afford their power bill, and the power they're getting is going to be not harmful.
Now, Daniel, I would be remiss, and you could dog walk me all day long, but I'm still not gonna dig into the meat of it yet because you talked about Energy Alabama. Let the people get to know who you are. How did you come to this work, with you starting at Energy Alabama, as well as just your passion for clean energy?
Well, I got a little bit of a weird and wild story about how I got into this. And the short version is, so we don't spend the whole podcast here talking about it, is there is this crazy event, right, that happened in Alabama in 2011 that a lot of folks know, and it's a huge tornado outbreak. And that's what has essentially ended up getting me into this world. That was actually the weekend I was supposed to get married.
Mm.
Tuscaloosa got hit pretty hard too. But up here in the Huntsville area, the main transmission line that serves kind of at the time, most of Northeast Alabama got cut. And so about 1 million people up here in North Alabama were without power for about 7 to 10 days, including us, including our wedding venue, including my wife's dress that was locked in an electronic safe.
No.
So we didn't have a wedding. We looked at each other and thought, "What the heck are we doing here? We might as well get on that plane because they had backup diesel generators." And so we left and went on our honeymoon, came back and got married a little bit later. So that kind of is a funny story, just to say that's how I got interested in this issue. A little bit after that, the city of Huntsville and some of the folks in our local community were thinking about, hey, it's not such a great idea that just one transmission line can take out power to 1 million people. We've got to figure out a way to fix this. I was working for the federal government, like it seems like most of Huntsville does, and I kind of raised my hand as a real young kid, just out of college, and said, "Hey, I'd like to be a part of that. I'll be on the committee and figure out how to do something better." And I tell you what, I just started going to these meetings and volunteering and trying to help out and understand this stuff, and I just fell in love. And so I eventually took the first kind of shot that I could to leave federal service and enter at the time a different nonprofit organization. And we were doing residential energy efficiency, and that's kind of how I learned the industry. And this was kind of the Obama era stimulus funding, and we were using that funding in Huntsville and in Birmingham to help upgrade homes on residential energy efficiency. And so, anyways, that's a long-winded story. Hopefully, as short as possible to say my wedding got halfway ruined. We came back, got married later, still married. Everything is great, and then that turned into a whole process of how do we build a more resilient community. And I thought, well, let's give it a shot, and I've been there ever since.
Thank you for that story, and also congratulations on that wedding. That was just dope story. But also, I've got connection with that story, and that we live in Pleasant Grove, where my mother-in-law has lived since 2011 or 2008, I believe. And so she was here during that tornado, and the community next to her got wiped out, and her community was left standing. So we had great experience with that, and that also brings up for me the fact that we are actually have tornadoes every year. There's a season of tornadoes here in Alabama, and I have had to go under the stairs in this home every year that I've been here. Every year that I've been here since 2018, I believe, I've had to go and hide up under the stairs while because of tornado warning, which lets you know that this thing is real. And we aren't just speaking stuff we read about or theorizing. talking about things that we live through in a real sense.
That's right.
So now you and I, Daniel, but prior to, I believe, us going on that tour, I believe we either responded to an article together or we wrote an article together or something where we were talking about them putting this specific tax or fee, but it really was a poor person's tax, if you will, on solar. And we that's where we met at. And you all have been doing some amazing work with being just watchdogs. And here's where Lindsay comes in the whole story because we all connected around arm in arm and really advocating against the terrible practices and exposing the fact that Southern Company is just not a good neighbor, and really being able to bring that to light. And you all have done some amazing work still, and I want to bring Lindsay in now to take over because Lindsay, you all, is the national director for Arm and Arm, and that's how she came to PJC. We were a part of Arm and Arm, and I saw the dynamic work in Lindsay and thought that I could follow that leadership, and so we brought Lindsay in just so I can follow her. And everything she tell us to do from here on. So, but but you and Lindsay have worked hand in hand when it's come down to shaping Alabama around arm in arm. So I'll let Lindsay jump in because I let the experts speak for themselves in this uh, narrative.
Well, I will make one comment, Rev, that you used to crack jokes on me all the time for all the lists that I used to make. You love my lists. It keeps us on track, don't it? No, but Daniel, one of the things I appreciated about your story, that's a story that I hear from a lot of people in the movement, who are in climate, anti-racism, environmental justice, energy, all the justices, right? There are a lot of people who don't choose this ecosystem, like it chooses you, or there's an experience that you have, or someone that you meet, and you get drawn in. And it's like one of those things where, once Pandora's box is open, like you can't close it. And so I also appreciate your story of kind of your introduction into the space. And I mentioned earlier, when I was introducing myself in the beginning, that I've always appreciated, like your level of expertise and knowledge around particular issues that has really, really been super informative, helpful, strategic, in just understanding all the various moving parts. As Rev mentioned, I got a chance to know you under Arm in Arm with the Power for Southern People, Not Southern Company campaign. And, we're here on the People's Power podcast. We talk about energy burden. We talk about building power with the people because in this country, monopoly energy companies are deeply embedded in legislatures across the country and federally as well. And they've got us captured, with the particular structure. You mentioned the Public Service Commission. I've learned a lot about the Alabama Public Service Commission from you, but I've also learned about the Georgia Public Service Commission from you as well. If you could maybe share with the people a little bit about things you think people should know about how energy companies in this country, and obviously we're talking about, the South here, but they're monopolies. They operate pretty much the same everywhere. But what are things that people can think about in their energy companies where they live and the relationship that the energy company has with the Public Service Commission where they are? What can we expect from our elected officials in the Public Service Commission?
Yeah, so I'll try to start by breaking down that there are three main types of utilities, but for the purpose of this conversation, we're going to talk about one and probably the biggest one for most people in the South. So some people have a municipal utility that's like me. Your utility is owned by, in my case, the city of Huntsville. Or you may have an electric cooperative and you're a member owner and you can vote on the board of directors. And so it's kind of a cooperative owned by the people. We do have a good bit of both municipal and cooperative utilities in Alabama. And sometimes those folks also buy power from other utilities like Alabama Power. So it's important to know is that even if you're not an Alabama Power customer or your utility is not regulated by the Alabama Public Service Commission, which we'll talk about in just a second, you can still be deeply affected by the policies of the Alabama legislature or the actions of the Public Service Commission because they may be a supplier to your utility, or for that matter, just get really bad ideas about what the world should be like and just copy those ideas. And we've seen that in Alabama. So the third, and probably most important for purposes of this conversation is an investor-owned utility. And that name is exactly what it is, right? It is a utility owned by investors, not the people. And it has an obligation to its shareholders to make money. The difference with any other type of investor-owned company, think Walmart, Target, anything listed on the New York Stock Exchange, is that, like you mentioned earlier, it's a monopoly. You don't have a choice about, hey, Alabama Power is going to offer me a good deal. I think I'm going to go, buy power from this other company because they have a better price and it's a cleaner product. There are some parts of the country that do parts of that, but most of the South is, operated under this investor-owned utility. The idea of an investor-owned utility, right, goes back well over 100 years, and it is that, it'd be really inefficient, and understandably so, to build, say, multiple grids and multiple sets of power plants. Why don't we just have one? Because that would be theoretically less costly, with the exception of, we all know what monopolies do, right? Like this goes back a long, long time in American history. Monopolies
Yeah.
are not new. Monopolies do what monopolies do, and that is take advantage of customers. So in order to avoid that, the idea of regulation with a public service commission, in some states they're called a public utilities commission, but here, public service commission for most of the South. And those folks are charged with, by state law, to regulate the investor-owned utility companies and make sure that they are only charging what they need in order to be able to provide service plus a reasonable profit for their investors. And that's it. Like there is a legit legal standard called just and reasonable, and that means that the rates and the amount of money that people pay and the decisions that are being made are just and reasonable. And that is really up to the Public Service Commission to determine. The last thing I'll say, Lindsay, is that in most of the South, those positions are elected, and that's actually quite unique. Most of the country has public service commissions or public utility commissions, and they are appointed positions usually by the governor. But Alabama, Georgia, and Mississippi, and Louisiana, for that matter, all elect their commissioners. Now, we've had some change here in Alabama, which we can get into about when elections happen and who's being elected and how much. But on the whole, they are elected bodies, which means that we, the people, elect who those regulators are. It's important to remember is that in the elected context, right, campaign finance matters, right? So that is who is paying for the elections or putting money into the coffers of people running for election. And so it's really important for informed voters to understand, the forces at play in an election in terms of who's who, who's funding who, why, whose bidding is doing, are they doing, are they fighting for consumers, or have they been protecting the monopoly utility interest? And so that is going to require, some folks like us and other people out there like PJC, to make sure that folks have the information that's accurate and timely, but also that voters are going to be, taking that in and making good decisions based on the data.
It would sound like because we're able to elect our representatives on our public service commission, that it would be a great opportunity for like civic engagement and really having a say so. And as far as like it may be different in other parts of the country. However, as a Georgia Power customer, and I said earlier, Southern Company is the monopoly utility, how they have Alabama Power, Mississippi Power, and Georgia Power, other subsidiaries. It's been quite a fight for years here in Georgia regarding how the Public Service Commission actually sets those rates, how can't talking about campaigns. there are many elected officials, not just the Public Service Commission, that get money from Georgia Power. As you said, monopolies, take advantage of their customers, and they do that by giving everyone money. Folks on the left and the right and out in the community, so nobody really has anything bad to say because you got to have your utility company. What are the ways that you could say the Public Service Commission maybe has not honored the fact that they've been elected? What are some themes, perhaps? And then I want to kind of get into some of the specific things that have happened in Alabama with your Public Service Commission. You know what I'm saying? But what are some themes that we're seeing here in the South regarding the the voters' relationship, the ratepayers' relationship with their Public Service Commission?
Yeah, I think it's important for folks to know whether elected or whether appointed. It is what we call regulatory capture, which is a fancy way to say that the regulators pretty much respond to the utilities and to no one else, at least on the whole. And
Mm.
that's pretty common around the country. Unfortunately, it shouldn't really be that way. Even a lot of consumer advocates, people that might not consider themselves environmental at all, but just want the lowest rates possible, are frequently ignored by the regulators. And there are a few reasons for that. One is that there's a huge resource mismatch, right? So you're thinking about Alabama Power, who can spend, 50, $60 million, in which that's about what they spent, I think, last year, or at least in a recent year, and what they called regulatory expenses. And they're charging you for that, right? So they're charging customers for $50 to $60 million to do nothing but deal with regulators. Do consumer advocates, does Energy Alabama, does PJC have $60 million to go around and make sure that we are working the regulators and the legislators all day, every day? No, we don't, right? So if on a practical standpoint, that's who the people in office are seeing all the time, because they're spending that level of money and that level of time and that level of people resources, that's probably who they're going to respond to. It's kind of a human nature thing that's who you see all the time. So that's part of it. The second is that there is definitely a feature of campaign finance. It's a little different across the South, to be clear. In Alabama and Georgia, for instance, it's not legal. It is illegal for the investor-owned utility to give money directly to the regulator. But of course, there are lots of ways around that. Just because you can't directly give money, there are other ways to do that, through PACs, or doesn't prohibit executives or the lawyers that represent those utility interests. And so essentially, money from the utility interest will get its way into the campaign somehow, some way. Now, Louisiana is just wild because they allow direct campaign contributions from the utility, and they do that by the millions, right? So it's like Wild Wild West out there in terms of campaign finance. But even if you don't allow that, that is, it takes a really active legislature to clamp down that level of influence through the campaign finance system. And we haven't seen that level of interest by really any legislature in the South and most in the country. And that brings me to my last point, which is that the public service commissions in Alabama, Mississippi, and Georgia are creatures of the legislature, which just means that they were created by the legislature, they can be changed by the legislature, and they can be eliminated by the legislature. Which means that if a public service commission just does something that Georgia Power or Alabama Power really doesn't like, I mean, like really doesn't like, they can just go to the legislature and pass a law and say, everything the Alabama Public Service Commission just said is crap, and I want you to undo it. And we see stuff like that all the time. I mean, Georgia's actually got a good example of this where, and the run up to Plant Vogtle, this actually happened in a few states. The utilities didn't believe that they could get their public service commissions to agree to build these new expensive power plants. So they had to go to their state legislatures to pass laws, which essentially tied the hands of the public service commissions to make them say yes, right? So it's important to remember that dynamic, right? Is that if you're an elected official, or an appointed official for that matter, um, anything that you say or do really can be overridden by the legislature. And guess what? there are no practical limits of how much money Alabama Power or Georgia Power can give to those people, right? So if you think about it, even though the influence may not be direct at the Public Service Commission, it's definitely direct at the legislature, and the people who serve on the PSC know this dynamic, right? That they can be overridden and threatened at any time, and in some cases, they could be removed from office, especially in gubernatorial appointment type of processes. So yeah, that those are kind of the three main ways in which, you would think on paper having a voice with elected regulators would be a good thing. And I do personally believe in its Energy Alabama stance that it is preferable to elect your regulators than it is to appoint them, because we want the decision to be as close to the people as possible. However, there are other flaws in the system which blunt the impact, or maybe not the impact is the right way to put it, the influence of the people's votes, because of the money in the system and the oversight from the legislature that can just undo essentially what the people's representatives may want. So that's kind of the lay of the land of how we got here.
Okay. Got you. I wanna pass to Rev because I definitely want to talk about energy sources and some of the new ways the energy companies have decided to use up our money and our energy. But before I do that, I did want to ask you a little bit about like watchdogging. You all are a sick watchdog organization, and I was hoping you could maybe share what is watchdogging, what is how is it that you all watchdog, like what is your like way, and as we move forward, because we can't always have organizations that are always doing the watchdogging, right? Citizens, voters, ratepayers can watchdog as well, and when we get to data centers, we need everybody to have their eyeballs on this. So could you tell just a little bit about watchdogging, what it is, what that looks like, and how people can do it themselves?
The most simple way to put it is, if you see something, say something, right? I
Mm,
mean, we all see it, not just with energy related stuff, right? Like we all see stuff in our day to day lives that just ain't right. And that's essentially what we're trying to do with our watchdogging. I mean, at the end of the day, we are really trying to hold the power company accountable. And when we say that, when we say we're trying to hold Alabama Power accountable, is that we didn't say these things. Alabama Power said these things. The utilities said these things, that it was going to provide affordable and reliable service, that it was going to provide clean energy that was going to be helpful to communities. It went out there and made these promises, both to communities and in many cases to its own investors, that it was going to do something. And it doesn't do those things, or it says them on paper while it completely does the opposite in practice. And when we say that, or we see that, I should say, we're going to say something about it, because we are going to remind the people that, once again, this monopoly utility interest is doing the exact opposite of what it is they always claim to do. Now, I'll say that today is a lot different than it was a few years ago, right? In the sense that now they're, I would say, duplicity of the utilities is just on full display. Like the bills are so high and so out of control that pretty much everybody that we speak to now can see, hey, these guys are full of crap. They never meant it. They were just feeding us a line, keep us fat, fed, and happy, and then threw us out the slaughter as soon as we were ready to go. And so I think, to that standpoint, it's good that the people are finally, coming to understand exactly how we got. Like, I've seen just a tremendous education and awakening of the people that I'm very, very happy to see. um, but that requires the watchdogging, right? Is that every time that you see something, you say something. Well, guess what? About 80% of the time that we say something, most people ignore it, or they don't understand it, or they missed it, or the context wasn't right. But we're going to document it, and we're going to make sure that there's a record of the fact that we said this is wrong. You shouldn't be having the highest profit in America on the backs of some of the poorest people in America. That's wrong. And we're going to continue to say that. And then at some point in the future, the dam will break, to use a really bad metaphor about energy, right? And to say, we know this is wrong. And finally, there will be a point in which the people will hold the utility company accountable. And for that matter, their elected officials who enable this type of behavior.
Thank you.
A recent example of that, Daniel, would be you all's bird dogging and reporting out on what was happening with the Public Service Commission and the legislators trying to eliminate the Public Service Commission's election and have it an appointed position rather than an elected position. Can you talk more about that? Because that's one of the wins we can actually celebrate in this whole fight. I guess I need to add on to that this question as well, these questions as well. How much do you think that that whole scenario had to do with the data centers and this whole phenomenon of these data center build outs? And secondly, um, where do you think that we are in this whole fight with data centers as far as what should we be looking for or be aware of? Um, as Alabama, I guess I could say, but also you knowing the landscape of the Gulf South, just talking about it on the Gulf South level.
Yeah, for sure. So I'd say, we had a really big win in the legislature. We also had a loss that wasn't entirely a loss, but it definitely wasn't all we wanted. So let me explain what happened. Essentially, this dynamic that I was just talking about, the people are aware, right, that they're getting hosed by Alabama Power. And Alabama Power sees that coming. They realize that it doesn't matter what happens in the election, left, right, primary, general, they're about to get their butts handed to them because the people are so mad. And they saw it in other states. This issue, whether elected or appointed, has become one of the top, if not the top issue in elections. And so their decision or their idea was, hey, I got this, really, really smart thing here. How about we just take the right to vote all the way away and we just appoint these positions because then we can make sure essentially that those people continue to do our bidding, right? So it goes back to, hey, the electeds, maybe they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, but the second that they might wake up, whoa, we got a problem here. We got to take that fancy vote away. That was House Bill 392. And we organized along with lots of other people all across the state. It was frankly amazing to watch. We were happy to play a part in it, but we were just a part, in terms of the public response to that. I've never seen anything like it. And ultimately, the people, I mean, by the hundreds of thousands, it was wild, made their voices heard. And when the legislature went back home that weekend, they caught a near full and killed that bill and then came back and so that bill was dead. And then the legislature comes back and we had two competing bills. And I'll try to wrap this up is we have what was a good bill on House Bill 475. And that bill would have required rate hearings. It would have eliminated political expenses from your utility bill. And it would have just limited their profit to the regional median, but all kinds of good stuff to save people money. Then there was basically the bad bill again, but with a new fancy name, Power to the People. And it was going to say, well, we're not going to get rid of elections. We're going to make now 7 commissioners from our current 3. And yeah, let's appoint 4 right now so that we have, basically a working majority immediately, even before the elections finish up. And then after that, then we'll elect them later. Don't worry about that. Huh? So, then, the good bill passes the House, the bad bill passes the Senate, and then they start negotiating. And what do you know? The good bill gets completely substituted out, and the bad bill gets completely substituted in, and mostly all of the bad bill and very little of the good bill, make it through and pass the legislature. So that's essentially what happened. And so now, I say it's a win and still a loss in that, well, we killed the first bill, which was what they really wanted, right? That they wanted to take away your right to vote altogether. They didn't get that. You still will be able to vote. There are appointments. I freaking hate that. And it shouldn't be that way. Blatant power grab, but that's what it is. There will be elections in the future. And part of the good news about the elections in the future is that they will be district based, right? So whereas in prior years, they had always been statewide, now you will have someone in your district more close to home, that represents you and your community. So that's kind of the way that went down. Now, you asked me some questions about data centers and like what was fueling a lot of this outrage. And I do think that, the uncertainty and uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, maybe just uncertainty about data centers and what they mean and how much they can affect people's power bills has got a big part to do with that. I will say that for Alabama part, we don't have a lot of data. So we're starting to see some, but compared to say like Louisiana, Mississippi, and Georgia, we're like nothing compared to those guys. So I don't want to like make it like it's not a big deal. It will happen here, and we should get ahead of it. And we're trying to do that, but uh, we already have like ridiculous bills before that. I think that's really what people are responding to. And then they're even more worried like, well, hell, if it's this bad and we don't even have data centers, what's it going to look like if we don't do this right or we don't, take a look at it in the future? The last thing I'll say, I'm sorry, I'm going a little long here, is just that like, what do we look for in the future with these data center fights to make sure that customers are protected? One win that we did get was Senate Bill 270, which passed the legislature. We advocated for that. It's not a perfect piece of legislation, but it's better than nothing. It would be better than the legislature going away and having no protections in place whatsoever. But this starts the process of making sure that if there's going to be a data center, the cost to supply their power, their infrastructure is going to be borne by the data center, and that there actually not just has to be held harmless, but there actually has to be a benefit for other customers. Now, all that's great to say in law. We still got to hold them accountable at the Public Service Commission to make sure they actually do that. But the fact that we have that in law now is a really big deal. And so I think for regular people, you want to make sure that you're looking at who's paying for what, and are you picking up the tab for a multi-billion-dollar corporation when you shouldn't? And those decisions are going to be made at the Public Service Commission. And so that's why you're going to want to get involved, I think, with groups like PJC, like hopefully Energy Alabama, to if there's a fight that pops up like that, we can, get active and say, hey, whoa, no, we're not paying for that infrastructure. That's yours.
You brought up Plant Vogel, and we were talking about, again, data centers and how they're sourced now. I know Lindsay has done some extensive work with Plant Vogel and could really have some detailed conversation with you on it. But Lindsay, I'll bring you back in just to talk about the dirty energy sources that we're already using, and the onboarding of Plant Vogel to help power some of this and the others that are now coming online and being proposed. So, Lindsay, I'll jump you back in, if you will, just to kind of take over on this part.
Sure, I'll set it up. I do have a background somewhat in nuclear energy and just understanding how where nuclear energy is in this country, how it's used in this country, how much money is made off of it, how much contamination actually comes from nuclear. Even they lie and tell you everybody talks about CO2, nobody talks about water. But that being said, we are coming out of an era where we're trying to, with our past administration, trying to do more with cleaner energy sources. And now we're having an administration that does not support clean energy. And so not only do they not support clean energy, but they're also supporting huge hyperscale build outs of data centers, which are very much impacting folks across the country. We're here mainly talking about the South. But you mentioned nuclear power plant Vogtle earlier, which is a nuclear power plant in Georgia that got completed. What was it, last year, year before last? It's been some time now. And there are other dirty energy sources that are also fueling these data centers because they're so energy hungry. They're so water hungry. They take up land. They're noisy, right? But in thinking about, we already know these monopoly companies are going to charge us for all the things. They're going to charge us for the new infrastructure. They're going to charge us whatever the rate because they have to make their shareholders money. Well, if they're going to increase their energy use because of the data centers, I mean, our bills are only going to go up. So I was hoping you could talk a little bit more about the increase of the use of energy and the dirty energy that's being used is already killing us. But how that's actually increasing at the moment and what kind of trajectory are we looking at?
Yeah, I think there's two things to think about here for folks. One is the economic, financial, who pays for what. And that's kind of what we were just talking about with, Senate Bill 270, again, doesn't go all the way, but starts the process. We need to fix that maybe in the next legislative session, or the PSC could go further to like fully hold customers harmless. And that means, like, even if they are building new gas plants and there's harm there from an environmental perspective and a community perspective, you're not paying for it. Then it goes to the second bucket, which is the community harm, the environmental harm. Like we're really concerned, really more so with new gas plants being built. That's usually what you're seeing with a new data center coming to town. I mean, look what's happening with Meta in Louisiana. I mean, they're building massive number and amount and size of gas plants to power a metadata facility, a data center facility there in northern Louisiana. That's really what we're worried about. And I think there's something to say there is that in terms of like there's holding them harmless, but I think that what you really want to pay attention to as a consumer and holding like your regulators and your utility accountable is what happens if things go wrong. And what I mean by that is, you have, I think the best way to put it is, Meta comes to town and they operate this data center and they build all these gas plants. And what happens if they turn them down, or they leave, or they, aren't there in 5 years or in 10 years, right? What happens to all those assets? Maybe they even promise to pay, but if they're not there, is there a way to pull that investment back, right? And then again, with we're mostly concerned with the construction of new gas to support this. Interestingly enough, right, there's actually a lot of capacity on our existing grid. The issue is really at peak times and the hottest of the summer and the coldest of the winter. And there's been a lot of great research. In fact, one done by this gentleman named Tyler Norris, formerly of Duke, and now he works for Google, about how data centers and other large loads can be more flexible so that they can, use existing infrastructure and pay for that without needing to build new power plants or substantially reduce, like maybe with batteries, impact on the grid. And so, you know, I think that in many cases, when you have an investor owned utility that is out for profit and kind of stuck in its ways, everything looks like we should just build a gas plant because that's easy for me to do and I make a lot of money by doing it. And even if we're going to build data centers, there are other ways to do this, whether we build data centers or not, or how big they are. And that's incumbent on both the data center companies demanding it and the utilities and their regulators being more creative than just saying, every problem we've ever had, what we just need to do is throw more gas at it. That's how we've ended up into this affordability crisis in the first place, right? So that's not going to get us out of it by continuing to make the same mistake.
That's facts.
But that, I mean, that's the thing of it, Daniel. At the end of the day, is affordability, and that's the crisis we're in. Uh, I believe that the irresponsible development has driven that crisis and continues to drive it. And if we don't do something about it, and do it in a hurry, it'll get out of hand to the point that people will get lost in the shuffle, in a real sense. And that's the scary part, because we already see the damage that's been done with where we are now, the harm that's being done with where we are now, and the projected harm is that much more worse. I think that we are irresponsible in the development of this, and we need to stop until we can do some real research and put some real energy behind doing this thing harmlessly, if at all.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. I mean, there's definitely I'll say that for all its good and for all its bad, Alabama is never first at anything, right? So we have we have plenty of neighbors around us and around the country who have been down this road who we can learn from. And I think that there are ways to do almost anything smartly, but it requires almost always, right, a willing political system, a willing public service commission or legislature to say we're not just going to take the easy way out. We're going to do the right thing, and that's really where I think people power comes from. Is that guess what? In most cases, they're probably not going to do that unless you make them.
That's what we're going now. I mean, at the end of the day, we still got the power, beloveds. We have the power through our vote. I think it's incumbent of us and our responsibility to one, get to know your legislators and vote for the ones that's going to build that better tomorrow with you, in cooperation with you, versus against you. Um, at the end of the day, we've had a public service commission, the same public type of public service commission, for decades. And what has changed really outside of our pockets, uh, uh, less and less full, in a real sense. And there's a lot of alternatives that we could be doing because although they may have small imaginations, we as the people have large imaginations and solutions already exist. It's just the will to invest in those solutions. We can push that will by voting. We can push that will by voting and let our voices and our will be known through voting. It's not power to them, it's power to the people.
Amen.
Hey, listen, man, we've come down to the end of this thing. And I just want to again thank you, brother Tate, for being with us. You always come through for us as a hero, and we appreciate you and Energy Alabama with all that's within us. Um, hey, listen, y'all. As always, we offer to you love, peace, and light.
Thank you.